You think you know California. Hollywood sign, Golden Gate Bridge, Disneyland, maybe some beach in Malibu where you'll never afford a house. But California's got secrets. Weird ones. The kind of places that don't show up on tourist maps because either nobody knows about them or the locals would prefer to keep it that way. Underground gardens, ghost towns, bizarre geological formations, and places so strange you'll question whether you're still in the same state that gave us avocado toast and tech billionaires. So forget everything you thought you knew, because I bet you don't know these 17 secret places in California. Number 17, Forestieri Underground Gardens. There's a 10-acre network of underground rooms, courtyards, and gardens in Fresno that one man spent 40 years digging by hand, and most Californians have never heard of it. Baldassare Forestier, a Sicilian immigrant, arrived in 1906, hoping to start a citrus empire. Instead, he bought 80 acres of land with terrible soil and a layer of hardpan rock just below the surface that made farming nearly impossible. Most people would have given up. Forestieri went down. Using only shovels, picks, and other hand tools, he spent 4 decades excavating a subterranean complex that goes as deep as 25 feet underground. He built 65 rooms including bedrooms, a kitchen, a bath, a fish pond, and a parlor with a fireplace. Then he did something even stranger. He started growing fruit trees underground. The trees grow through skylights he carved into the ceilings, their roots and underground planters, their canopies reaching toward the surface. Some of those trees are still producing fruit over a century later. Grapevines cascade down through openings. Citrus trees peek out from below, and somehow it all works. The underground temperature stays 10 to 20 degrees cooler than the brutal Fresno summer heat, which was exactly the point. Forestier worked without blueprints, following only the visions in his head. He carved arches and vaults reminiscent of ancient Roman architecture, created courtyards open to the sky, and connected everything with winding passageways. The place looks like catacombs designed by someone who really loved gardening. He died in 1946 before finishing his dream of turning it into a Mediterranean resort, but his family opened it as a museum and tours run most of the year. As one visitor put it, "You'll never have that creepy feeling of being underground. The house is filled with skylights. You sense that the family that lived here lived in comfort." Number 16, Glass Beach, Fort Bragg. California has a beach made of glass, which sounds like either a beautiful accident or a terrible idea for barefoot walking. Glass Beach in Fort Bragg is both. For decades, this was the town dump. Residents threw their garbage, including tons of glass bottles, jars, and broken glass, directly onto the beach and into the ocean, because that's what passed for waste management in the early 20th century. The practice continued until 1967, when the dump finally closed. What remained was a beach covered in broken glass and trash. Then something unexpected happened. Decades of waves tumbling the glass against sand and rocks rounded the sharp edges, frosted the surfaces, and transformed garbage into something that looks like scattered gemstones. The beach became covered in smooth, colorful sea glass. Greens, browns, clear pieces, occasional blues, and rare reds. The California Coastal Conservancy and volunteers conducted cleanup programs in the late 1990s and early 2000s, removing the actual trash while leaving the glass. Now, Glass Beach is part of McCarracher State Park, and people come from around the world to see a beach that glitters with decades of discarded bottles polished by the Pacific. Taking the glass is illegal. It's considered theft of state park property, but that doesn't stop tourists from pocketing pieces anyway. The beach is noticeably less glass covered than it was 20 years ago, which means you're looking at the slow disappearance of a place that only existed because of environmental negligence in the first place. Number 15, Salvation Mountain. In the middle of the Colorado Desert, near the Salton Sea, there's a 50-foot-tall artificial mountain covered in 500,000 gallons of paint, created by one man who spent 30 years building a monument to God and love. Leonard Knight started building Salvation Mountain in 1984, originally planning to create a hot air balloon with the message, God is love. When the balloon didn't work, he built a mountain instead. The mountain is made from adobe clay and donated paint, lots of donated paint. Knight mixed the paint with the clay to waterproof it, and he painted every surface with biblical verses, flowers, waterfalls, and the words God is love repeated endlessly. The whole thing is blindingly colorful. Reds, yellows, blues, greens, covering the hillside in folk art that's visible for miles across the desert. Knight lived in a truck at the base of his mountain for decades, working on it constantly until his death in 2014. The site is now maintained by volunteers and protected as a folk art installation. You can walk up the painted hillside, explore rooms built into the structure, and take photographs that make it look like you've stepped into a fever dream about religion and primary colors. Number 14. Lassen Volcanic National Park. Ask someone to name California's national parks, and you'll hear Yosemite, Sequoia, Joshua Tree, maybe Death Valley. Lassen Volcanic National Park doesn't make most people's list, which is exactly what makes it worth visiting. This is California's most overlooked national park, featuring active geothermal areas, volcanic peaks, alpine lakes, and far fewer crowds than the famous parks. Lassen Peak last erupted from 1914 to 1917 in a series of explosions that sent ash 7 miles into the atmosphere. The area remains volcanically active with bubbling mud pots, steaming fumaroles, and boiling springs that look like the Earth is perpetually annoyed. Bumpass Hell, the park's largest hydrothermal area, features a boardwalk trail over hissing vents and pools of boiling water that smell distinctly of sulfur. The park has over 150 miles of trails through landscapes that range from volcanic wasteland to lush meadows to snow-capped peaks. You can hike to the summit of Lassen Peak, camp beside alpine lakes, or just watch the ground steam in areas where volcanic heat is still close to the surface. The park gets about 500,000 visitors annually, compared to Yosemite's 4 million, which means you might actually find parking. Number 13. Sunken City, San Pedro. There's a neighborhood in San Pedro that slid into the Pacific Ocean, and instead of cleaning it up, they just fenced it off and let urban explorers have at it. The Sunken City was once a development called the Palisades neighborhood, built in the 1920s on unstable cliffs above the ocean. In 1929, the cliffs gave way, and homes, streets, and infrastructure started sliding toward the sea. The landslide continued for decades. Residents watched as their property values literally fell into the ocean, one chunk of cliff at a time. Eventually, the city condemned the area, demolished some structures, and put up fences to keep people out. That worked about as well as you'd expect, which is to say, not at all. The Sunken City became one of Los Angeles' most famous unofficial destinations, covered in graffiti, attracting photographers, skaters, and anyone who wanted to explore ruins perched precariously above the Pacific. Walking through the Sunken City means navigating broken pavement at bizarre angles, chunks of foundation jutting from eroded hillsides, and stairs that lead to nothing but air and ocean views. Every surface is covered in layers of graffiti, from amateur tags to elaborate murals that get painted over and replaced in an endless cycle of unauthorized art. The entire area is still slowly collapsing, making every visit a calculated risk. Large pieces of concrete occasionally drop into the water below, reminding visitors that the ground beneath them isn't as stable as it appears. The city officially opened it for limited public access in 2016 during daylight hours, though the fences remain and the graffiti continues to accumulate. Signs warn of unstable ground, falling hazards, and the fact that entering remains technically illegal after dark. None of this stops anyone, because forbidden ruins with Pacific Ocean views are exactly the kind of thing that Californians will risk tickets to photograph. Number 12. Mono Lake. Mono Lake looks like it belongs on another planet, which makes sense because it's one of the oldest lakes in North America, and nothing about it is normal. This saline soda lake formed at least 760,000 years ago and has no outlet, which means salts and minerals have been accumulating for millennia, creating water that's about 2.5 times saltier than the ocean and highly alkaline. The lake is famous for its tufa towers, bizarre limestone formations that rise from the water like alien architecture. The towers formed underwater when freshwater springs containing calcium mixed with the carbonate-rich lake water. When Los Angeles Department of Water and Power diverted streams feeding the lake in 1941, water levels dropped dramatically, exposing the tufa formations that had been growing beneath the surface for thousands of years. The exposed tufa creates a landscape that photographers and filmmakers love. The white and gray towers stand in shallow water or on exposed shores, creating otherworldly scenes, especially at sunrise and sunset. Some formations rise 30 feet above the current waterline, their porous surfaces carved by wind and weather into shapes that seem too deliberate to be natural. The lake's extreme salinity supports an unusual ecosystem. Brine shrimp and alkali flies thrive here, which in turn attract millions of migratory birds, despite the water being essentially uninhabitable for fish. California gulls nest on the lake's islands in such numbers that Mono Lake is one of their primary breeding grounds. During migration seasons, the lake becomes a critical stopover for hundreds of thousands of birds feeding on the abundant invertebrates. Environmental efforts restored some of the lake's water levels starting in 1994 after decades of legal battles between conservationists and Los Angeles over water rights. But Mono Lake remains one of California's strangest natural features. A massive, salty, alkaline lake surrounded by volcanic formations and tufa towers in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada. Standing on its shores feels like visiting an ancient sea that refused to die when the climate changed, surviving through sheer chemistry and isolation. Number 11. Integratron. In the Mojave Desert near Landers sits a white dome that looks like it escaped from a 1950s sci-fi movie. The Integratron is a 38-foot-tall structure built in the 1950s by George Van Tassel, an aviation engineer who claimed to receive telepathic instructions from aliens on how to construct a time machine and rejuvenation chamber. Van Tassel supposedly met an alien named Solganda from Venus in 1953, who gave him the blueprints for the Integratron. He spent 18 years building the all-wood dome without metal fasteners, supposedly to avoid interfering with its electromagnetic properties. Van Tassel claimed the structure would be capable of cell rejuvenation and time travel through some combination of electromagnetic fields and alien technology. He died in 1978 before finishing the project, and the time machine never actually worked, assuming that was ever a realistic possibility. Today, the Integratron operates as a venue for sound baths, group meditation sessions where participants lie on the floor while someone plays crystal bowls. The dome's acoustics create interesting resonance effects, which is either a consolation prize for not becoming a time machine or exactly what it was meant to do all along, depending on your perspective. Number 10. Slab City. Slab City is an off-grid community in the Colorado desert built on the concrete slabs of a former World War II Marine training base. There are no services, no water, no electricity, no sewage, no rent, no property taxes. It's essentially a squatter settlement that's been operating since the 1940s, home to snowbirds, artists, retirees, and people who've given up on conventional society. The population fluctuates with the seasons, swelling to several thousand in winter and dropping to a few hundred in summer when temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees. Residents generate their own power, haul their own water, and create their own rules in a place that exists in a legal gray area on federal land. Salvation Mountain sits at the entrance to Slab City, but inside the community itself, the most famous landmark is East Zzyzx, an art installation and habitable sculpture garden created from scavenged materials. There's also The Range, an outdoor performance space hosting shows and events in the middle of the desert. Visiting Slab City means entering an alternate version of California where building codes don't exist, artistic expression covers every surface, and people live in converted buses, trailers, and structures built from whatever materials they can find. It's Mad Max meets Bohemian art commune meets retirement community, functioning in a desert that kills anyone who doesn't take survival seriously. Number 9. Bowling Ball Beach. There's a beach in Mendocino County where hundreds of spherical boulders are scattered across the sand like a giant abandoned a game mid-play. Bowling Ball Beach, officially part of Schooner Gulch Beach, is famous for these perfectly round rocks that are only visible during low tide. The boulders are concretions, geological formations created when mineral cement filled spaces between sediment particles. As the surrounding sandstone eroded over millions of years, the harder concretions remained, weathered into near-perfect spheres by waves and time. They range from a few inches to several feet in diameter, and they're scattered across the tidal zone in groups that photographers swarm during those narrow windows when the tide is low enough to reveal them. Getting to Bowling Ball Beach requires timing the tides correctly and then climbing down a steep trail to the beach. The spheres are most impressive when partially submerged in tidal pools or wet sand, creating reflections and patterns that make for dramatic photographs. Miss the tide window, and you'll see nothing but water. Show up at low tide during sunset, and you'll understand why people hike down the cliff for this. Number 8. Nitwit Ridge. In Cambria sits a house built almost entirely from garbage, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places. Arthur Art Beale spent 51 years building Nitwit Ridge, constructing it from abalone shells, beer cans, car parts, driftwood, ceramic tiles, rocks, and whatever else he could scavenge. Beale was a garbage collector, which gave him access to a constant supply of building materials that other people threw away. He bought the hillside property in the 1920s and started construction, eventually creating a 2.5-acre complex of terraces, rooms, paths, and gardens, all built from salvaged materials. The house includes abalone shell walls, floors made from creek rocks, and structural elements fashioned from telephone poles and other scavenged wood. The property is sometimes called Poor Man's Hearst Castle because it was being built around the same time William Randolph Hearst was constructing his famous castle up the coast. Where Hearst had unlimited money and professional architects, Beale had trash and determination. The result is outsider architecture at its finest, a folk art environment that somehow holds together after decades of wind, rain, and earthquakes. Beale lived in his creation until his death in 1992. The property is now privately owned and offers occasional tours. It's proof that you can build a house from garbage if you're patient enough and don't particularly care about building codes. Number 7. Vikings Holm Castle. Hidden at Emerald Bay in Lake Tahoe is a Scandinavian castle that looks like it was airlifted from Norway. Vikings Holm was built in 1929 by Laura Josephine Knight as a summer home designed to resemble an 11th century Norse fortress. The 38-room mansion features hand-hewn timbers, sod roofs, and intricate wood carvings modeled after authentic Viking architecture. Knight hired Swedish architect Lennart Palm to design the structure after touring Scandinavia. They incorporated architectural elements from various Nordic buildings, including churches and fortresses, creating a structure that's historically inspired, if not historically accurate. The exterior features dragon head carvings, steep-pitched roofs, and hand-hewn logs. Inside, the rooms are decorated with period-appropriate furnishings and more elaborate woodwork. Getting to Vikingsholm requires hiking down a 1-mile trail with 250-foot elevation change, which keeps casual tourists away. The castle sits at the edge of Emerald Bay, with views across some of Lake Tahoe's bluest water. Nearby is Fanette Island, the lake's only island, which also has a small stone structure called the Tea House that Knight built. Vikingsholm operates as a museum during summer months, but the hike down, and especially back up, means you're working for the privilege of seeing a 1920s millionaire's idea of a Viking castle in California. Number 6. Burrow Schmidt Tunnel. In the El Paso Mountains north of Mojave sits a half-mile tunnel through solid rock, hand-dug by one man over 32 years. William Burrow Schmidt started excavating in 1900, supposedly to create a shortcut to move his gold ore to a mill. He used hand tools, dynamite, and a mule, hence Burrow Schmidt, to dig through rock, working alone for 3 decades. The tunnel is 1,872 feet long, roughly 6 feet wide, and tall enough to walk through. Schmidt completed it in 1932, creating a passage from one side of the mountain to the other. The strange part? By the time he finished, a road had been built around the mountain, making the tunnel completely unnecessary for transportation. Some historians believe Schmidt never intended the tunnel for ore transport and instead dug it as an obsessive project or mental escape. Either way, he spent 32 years of his life carving through a mountain with minimal help, which is either inspiring or concerning depending on how you view ambition and productivity. The tunnel still exists and can be visited, though reaching it requires a rough dirt road and acceptance that you're hiking to see a hole in a mountain that one eccentric person spent most of his adult life creating. Schmidt died in 1954, but his tunnel remains as a monument to perseverance, obsession, or possibly both. Number 5. Bodie Ghost Town. Bodie is California's official ghost town, abandoned exactly as its residents left it when the gold mining boom ended. At its peak in 1880, Bodie had a population of about 10,000 people, 65 saloons, red light districts, gambling halls, and a reputation as one of the roughest mining camps in the West. When the gold played out, people left, and buildings were abandoned with possessions still inside. The town is now preserved in a state of arrested decay, meaning structures are stabilized but not restored. Walking through Bodie means looking through windows at furnished homes frozen in time, tables set for meals never eaten, stores with goods still on shelves, vehicles rusting where they were parked decades ago. About 200 buildings remain from the town's peak, scattered across sagebrush-covered hills at 8,400 feet elevation. Bodie experiences extreme weather, scorching summers, brutal winters, high winds year-round. The isolation helped preserve it because most vandalism requires effort, and Bodie is far enough from civilization that casual troublemakers don't bother making the trip. It's managed as a state historic park with rangers present, but the atmosphere remains genuinely eerie. The term "body luck" originated here, referring to finding riches or meeting a violent end. In a town where shootings and fires were regular occurrences, luck ran both ways. Now it's just quiet, wind blowing through empty buildings. A reminder that boom towns go bust and nature eventually reclaims everything. Number 4. Zzyzx. Zzyzx is a desert outpost with a deliberately bizarre name designed to be the last word in the English language alphabetically. Curtis Housbringer, a charlatan claiming to be a doctor, established the Zzyzx Mineral Springs and Health Spa in 1944 on the edge of the Mojave Desert. He filed a mining claim on federal land and built a spa resort where he sold bogus health tonics, promoted various fraudulent medical treatments, and ran radio broadcasts advertising his health empire. Springer chose the name Zzyzx specifically so it would appear last in road atlases and phone directories, believing this would make it memorable. He constructed buildings from local stone, piped in water from underground springs, and created an artificial lake in the desert. The operation continued until 1974, when federal authorities discovered his mining claim was a sham and evicted him. Today, Zzyzx is operated by California State University as the Desert Studies Center, a field station for university research programs. The buildings Springer constructed still stand, though they're now used for scientific research rather than selling snake oil to tourists. The artificial Lake Tuende remains, home to an endemic snail species and pupfish found nowhere else on Earth. The road to Zzyzx exits off I-15 between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. It's marked by a sign reading Zzyzx Road, and if you pronounce it correctly, Zzyzx. You're doing better than most people who just stare at the letters trying to figure out what vowel sounds to make. Number 3. Submarine tours at Catalina Island. Santa Catalina Island offers something most people don't expect in California. Semi-submarine tours where you can view marine life from underwater viewing areas without actually diving. The island sits 22 miles off the coast of Southern California and has been a popular getaway since the 1920s. But the submarine tours are what make it unusual. The undersea tour uses a semi-submersible vessel with underwater viewing chambers 5 feet below the surface. Passengers sit in the hull, looking out windows at kelp forests, reefs, and fish swimming past in their natural habitat. It's snorkeling without getting wet, scuba diving without the training, and marine life viewing without the sharks getting concerning close. The waters around Catalina are part of a marine protected area with extensive kelp forests and diverse fish populations. California's giant kelp can grow up to 2 feet per day, creating underwater forests that support complex ecosystems. The semi-sub tours navigate through these forests, past rocky reefs, and into areas where fish are accustomed enough to the vessel that they swim directly past the windows. Catalina Island itself has an interesting history. Bought by chewing gum magnate William Wrigley Jr. in 1919, used as a training ground for Army troops during World War II, and now primarily a tourist destination with the interior maintained as a nature preserve. But the submarine tours remain the island's most unusual attraction, offering views of underwater California that most people only see through scuba masks or aquarium glass. Number 2, Trona Pinnacles. In the middle of the Mojave Desert rises a landscape of 500 tufa spires and towers, some reaching 140 feet tall, creating a scene so otherworldly that filmmakers use it constantly for alien planets and post-apocalyptic settings. The Trona Pinnacles formed underwater 10,000 to 100,000 years ago when the Searles Lake covered this basin. Calcium-rich underground springs mixed with the alkaline lake water, creating calcium carbonate deposits that built up into formations under the surface. When the lake dried up, it left behind more than 500 pinnacles, spires, and tufa towers scattered across the desert floor. Wind and rain have been eroding them ever since, creating the weathered, alien appearance they have today. The pinnacles appear in over a dozen major films, including Planet of the Apes, Star Trek V, and various science fiction productions that needed an extraterrestrial-looking landscape without leaving California. The area is managed by the Bureau of Land Management, accessible by dirt road, and completely free to visit. You can walk among the formations, though the ground is rough, and the nearest services are in Ridgecrest, 20 miles away. Visiting the Trona Pinnacles means accepting desert conditions, extreme heat in summer, cold nights year-round, no shade, no water, and terrain that will destroy your shoes. But if you want to walk across what looks like another planet without leaving California, this is how you do it. Number 1, Channel Islands National Park. California has a national park that most Californians don't know exists, and you can only reach it by boat or plane. Channel Islands National Park consists of 5 islands off the coast of Southern California, each unique, all relatively untouched by development because they're isolated enough that casual tourism hasn't destroyed them. The islands are home to plants and animals found nowhere else on Earth. The island fox, island scrubjay, and several plant species evolved in isolation here, creating ecosystems distinct from the mainland just 20 miles away. The waters surrounding the islands are part of a marine sanctuary, with kelp forests, sea caves, and wildlife ranging from seals to migrating whales. Anacapa Island is the closest, a 90-minute boat ride from Ventura. It's famous for its natural arch and lighthouse, plus colonies of seabirds nesting on the cliffs. Santa Cruz Island is the largest, offering camping, hiking, and kayaking through sea caves. San Miguel Island is the most remote and windswept, where you can see 6 species of seals and sea lions hauled out on beaches. Visiting requires planning. You book boat passage through approved concessionaires, bring all your own food and water, and accept that weather can cancel trips without warning. There are no hotels, no restaurants, no shops. It's camping, hiking, kayaking, and wildlife watching in one of the least visited national parks in the system. As one ranger put it, people fly across the country to visit national parks they've heard of, and they drive past the dock where they could catch a boat to islands they've never heard of. The islands don't mind. California's hiding more than its housing market costs and traffic problems. These 17 places exist in the gaps between tourist destinations, known mostly to locals, adventurers, and people willing to drive dirt roads to see things that don't appear in guidebooks. Some were built by eccentric individuals with too much time and determination. Others are geological accidents that photography made famous. A few are just places nobody bothered to develop because they're too weird, too remote, or too difficult to monetize. If this list showed you places you'd never heard of before, hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden gems you're definitely going to add to your bucket list and then probably never actually visit because they're in Fresno or require a boat. And if you've been to any of these spots, drop a comment and tell us which ones are worth the hype and which ones are better left secret.